Hey, how's it? I'm Dan, and this is the first episode of a new branch of my already existing podcast, Breathing Underwater Podcast, which also includes a folklore-related podcast called SUPing, music cast about music, movie cast about movies and TV and media and stuff, and Mobius Cast, which is where this podcast got started originally more than 10 years ago, and it's just a chance for my friend Jeremiah and I to talk about our creative endeavors and our creative process. But this one is going to be totally different and outside of those. Those all tend to be more about creativity and media consumption. This one, though, is going to be in its own little pocket about a subject that I like to refer to as adventuring. And I debated for a while about doing an audio podcast about this. I'll get more into that in a second. But I want to say up front that though the podcast is new, me exploring this area of activity and thrill seeking is not. And I've been documenting so far on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/breathing underwater. And you can see a playlist there of my adventuring adventures. So this is kind of an extension of that. And let's get into what this is and why I decided to do this. Give a little background, history, and context. So when I say adventuring, I'm talking about mostly like outdoorsy adventuring sports, but I like to distinguish between the idea of sports and adventuring, or at least there's a difference to me, because to me, the idea of sports has always come with a lot of constraints and limitations around rules and expectation, traditions. And sure, I grew up playing a variety of sports like most kids I knew did. Started with t-ball, played soccer for about 5 years, played a season of basketball in middle school, ran track in high school, and all throughout that time I was involved in several different types of martial arts. But while doing all of that, even the stuff that I generally enjoyed the skill, I just was never really motivated to dedicate the time and effort and discipline to really push myself towards excelling in them because of the over-reliance and dependence and fervency of all the rules and expectations.
Always root for the local sports team.
It suffocated the reason that I wanted to play them in the first place, which was just to have fun. I completely respect that many, maybe most people prefer the rules and structures of sports and sporting activities and competition because it gives them like boundaries, expectations, some predictability. There's a safety and a comfort in it. I totally get that. But for me, those things, those limitations, those boundaries, those rules really suck the inherent fun out for me. I really like the game and skills of, like, let's say basketball. I love just playing basketball, dribbling a ball and shooting hoops and maybe playing with my kids or with friends just for fun. But playing it competitively with any seriousness just puts way too much pressure on the purpose as opposed to the experience, for me at least. Another example, when I was living on Maui, I had a couple different experiences with being invited to fill out a roster, kind of like the Sandlot. There was pickup softball in our community in Kihei, which is on the southern coast of the island. And I was also invited to play some beach volleyball. These are both sports that I'm aware of, and I'm generally familiar with how they're played. And I feel like I'm not anywhere close to being good at them, but competent. At least I understand, what's expected to be able to play the game, catch a ball, hit a ball. So when I was invited by peers to do something, after work for fun, and I was told that it was like low stakes, low expectations, low pressure, just a bunch of people getting together to have fun, play some games. Sounded great because I love being active and I love doing fun stuff. But once I started playing, there was so much, like I said, fervency and over-reliance and nitpicking every little rule and what everybody was supposed to be doing or not doing and how they were supposed to do it. And the fact that I don't know every little rule and intricacy of all of these games meant that somebody actually had to stop and explain things to me, which, was frustrating for them. Because I guess people just assume that sports are so saturated in our culture that people just know everything about them or should. But newsflash, I don't care. If I'm not playing something right, I question why does it have to be right? It's a game, right? So that really turned me off, even to just doing things outside of being on a league or something, but just doing pickup things supposedly for fun, but still being expected to know all the ins and outs and take it really seriously, which I just don't. Another example, speaking of Maui, is that I love to surf, but I have no interest in the competitive side of it. When I was living on Maui especially, but even now, when somebody finds out that I'm interested in surfing, did you see this competition? You see this person just won, blah, blah, blah. My answer is almost always no, because I just don't care about that part of it. Look, I'm a big kid. I like to play. And I don't like being told how I should play, or have to compare myself to others' play, or define my experience by how good or competent or competitive I am, or limit how much fun I can have at playing due to all these arbitrary rules and expectations around it. Also, I've just never been a good spectator of sports, but also just play in general. There's really not that much that's more boring to me, other than just general bureaucracy, than watching other people play and have fun and me not getting to. Like when I go to a sporting event, or if I go to the oceans or the mountains, even if I don't know the game or the rules, or even have the necessary skills, I would always rather be participating than watching. Similarly, as a side note, I cannot stand watching other people play video games, but I love playing video games. I'm just not, in general, good at being patient and passive. I really like to be doing things and being active. It's just my personality.
But I'm afraid you'll just have to wait.
I hate waiting.
So, adventuring to me includes most anything that is fun, really. Because I think adventure and fun can be found in endless ways of playing and exploring life and ourselves and our skills and our limits and our fears, whether in big and impressive or small and unremarkable ways. But generally, I found the most adventure in doing individualized outdoorsy kind of stuff. For instance, I've already mentioned surfing, fell in love with the ocean when I moved to Maui. And with that, spiraling out of that is just anything on a board, skating, mountain boarding, kiteboarding, even playing around on my balance board at home. And I have a one wheel, so I'm kind of in the e-skate community, but not super intense about it, just like I'm not super intense about anything other than, I guess, making podcasts. I'm a rock climber. You can see on my YouTube channel that I have videos about my indoor climbing wall that I built in my garage. I used to be a big time road cycler. I love to hike, kayak, raft, trail run, just explore the outdoors. I like jumping off of things into water. I call it cliff jumping, and there's a video about that on my YouTube channel. And we'll get more into all these things and other stuff that I probably forgot to mention as this podcast moves along. But generally, I'm referring to things that I can do at my own pace, in my own ways, while pushing myself to improve and not ignoring the skills and experience of pros and elites, because I'm always willing to learn and grow. But bottom line, that is as long as I'm still having fun. That's what it all comes down to for me. That's what motivates me and excites me about this. It's not being amazing. It's not showing off. It's not impressing anybody, except for maybe myself. It's did I have fun in the process of learning it, doing it, reflecting on it? Was it an experience that was worth having and that I'd want to repeat? But just to clarify, I am more of a dabbler than a specialist. This is a pattern that I've had in all areas of my life. As much as I would love to excel at one thing and be like the best, I'm just interested in so many different things, and every time I'm exposed to something new, I want to try it. And then if I try it and I like it, I want to keep doing it. And that just adds to the challenge of trying to find more time for that new thing, along with all the other things that I currently want to do. Not to mention all the other things that I have to do, all the responsibilities and adulting that comes with being an adult. So I do what I can. I try to do the best I can when I have the time to do it, but I try to focus on that main goal of fun again, instead of getting disappointed when I'm not as good or not making as much progress as I'd like. And honestly, you'll hear me talk and critique a lot of the elite philosophy or ideas, but that honestly is coming more from a place of envy than judgment for people that are so good that it blows my mind. And I know that I'll never be able to get to that point for a variety of reasons. And I'm not even just talking about the competitive pros and people that win all the awards or have all the views on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Even just otherwise, like everyday ordinary people that have the opportunity to be exposed to this kind of fun stuff that I enjoy from an early age, and also then have the resources and the support and the time to devote to doing these things. Because, and I have to give credit where it's due, my parents were amazing parents and they did like to have a lot of fun. We did do a lot of casual hiking, especially because my mom partially grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and was familiar with a lot of the fun and adventurous hiking opportunities out there, like Camelback Mountain and such. So we would do those things when we go visit our family for holidays and vacations. My dad liked to kayak, a little bit of whitewater, but mostly flat water paddle. We'd go do like Potomac or Antietam in this mid-Atlantic area where I grew up. We were a big bike riding family. And my dad was a lifelong skier. So even though I didn't really get into that or connect with him on it until I was out of college, I definitely had some influence and some perspective on these things. But at the same time, I grew up and down the East Coast, landlocked, really wasn't that familiar, exposed to the ocean or the mountains to any regular degree. And though I found out later that Pasadena, Maryland, that I grew up in outside of Baltimore, Maryland, is on a peninsula on the Chesapeake Bay, and there was a lot of opportunity for fun water sports that I could have partook in. Is it partook or partaken? That just wasn't something that was on our radar growing up. However, towards the end of college and then right after, my dad and I really got into road cycling and we did some fun tours, a video of which you can see on my YouTube channel. And then soon after that, I moved to Maui, and then the whole world kind of opened up to me, which is ironic because I was on a little island out in the middle of the Pacific. But that's when I finally realized, being so close to, I could touch on a daily basis mountains and the ocean, what the possibilities were. And so fast forward about a decade, here I am in Richmond, Virginia. Yes, we have the James River. We have a lot of great access to outdoorsy stuff, hiking, water sports in the surrounding rivers and lakes, couple hours from mountains, couple hours from the ocean. So though I'm back to kind of where I started, being relatively more landlocked and isolated from that tangible awesomeness that I grew quickly used to while living on Maui, I definitely have a new perspective on what's out there and what's possible. And that is what led me to doing this podcast. Doing this was unplanned, but so are pretty much all of my creative endeavors. And though I thought about it for a while because I've had my podcast going, like I said, off and on since 2010, I was living on Maui with my creative partner from the Mobius project, Jeremiah. I didn't pursue doing an audio version of adventuring topic podcast until now because I didn't think it fit well with this audio only format. But my intention for doing that side of my YouTube channel, the adventuring side, was always to connect with like-minded people, share experiences, learn from other people, that kind of stuff. And as you can already see on the adventuring playlist on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/breathingunderwater, and which will be the subsequent audio episode of this podcast, my intentions were vindicated when, after I put out a mountainboarding one-wheeling video about a year ago from recording this in Thanksgiving break of 2022. A fellow mountain boarder who I found out later is in the Virginia Beach area, so not too far from Richmond, who goes by the moniker of Anarchy Peaks, started following me. I followed him back. We started liking each other's videos and watching each other's progress. So I reached out to him and said, hey, do you want to have a discussion about our experiences mountain boarding, especially at this point in our adult lives, picking up this pretty rough and tumble sport and sharing it with the world, and why we wanted to do that. And he was all about it, as you can see on the video, or you can hear in the next episode of this podcast. And having that discussion with him allowed me to finally see the potential value of having an audio platform to expand my scope of output and adventuring beyond just videos. I don't necessarily have a definitive plan of action at this point, but now that I have some content, I'm excited to have this space to allow for more discussions with people that I interact with in all of these different areas. Everything from, like I said, boarding to climbing to scuba diving, all the other stuff that I enjoy, that I know other people enjoy at the level that I do. And I just like this to be a way to motivate some interaction and talk some shared interests with these people, and hopefully learn things from each other and have things to offer for you to learn and get inspired by. So please, if you haven't, subscribe and stay tuned and share with anybody that you think might be interested in this kind of stuff, because there's lots more to come. But for now, for the rest of this episode, I would like to offer the audio clips of some more of my kind of philosophical and self-justifying and rationalizing context around what I do and how I feel about it that I've already recorded in some of my YouTube videos. But I thought it might be helpful, at least for me, for a sort of obsessive cataloger and organizer of information and ideas, to take those clips, kind of non-visual part from those videos, and let those speak for themselves. So thanks for tuning in. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I'd love to connect with you if you're interested in any of this stuff and maybe even discuss things here on this show. So this is Dan from the present signing off, and now here's Dan from the past offering some insight into why he and I do what we do and what it means to us. Bear with me as I go off on a little bit of a tangent for a second. I always feel a imposter syndrome when I get around to making a video like this, and it comes from early on, where this whole culture, even before the internet, just to date myself, when I was a kid growing up and I wanted to get into music, comic books, anything like that. There was always this gatekeeper mentality that I was aware of that was just kind of thrown in my face. And I was getting into music, and I started wearing Pearl Jam shirts, and kids would be like, name 5 songs, there's some kind of authority over who and what is the right or wrong way to be into something. When you're exposed to it and how you explore it is, you're only righteous if you do it a certain way. And that's always really bothered me. And it's detracted from my willingness sometimes to go into things because of feeling like I'm not worthy, I'm not righteous, I'm not good enough. I've walked into comic book stores where I feel like they're looking down their nose at me because I'm looking for some popular series, and it's oh, you don't know about all this abstract indie release stuff that you should, And the word that was thrown around a lot when I was a kid, it was poser. You're a poser if you get into something later than somebody else, if you discovered a band or you discovered some IP later than somebody else. You can see in my podcast that I grew up with classical musician parents, so there was no reason that I would be exposed. I didn't have any older siblings that, that were already cool and passing down records to me that, that I should be into. I got exposed to stuff later. What I'm trying to say is that all feeds into this stuff that I'm now. I'm in my 30s, and I only got into a lot of this adventuring stuff later in life, after college. I went tandem skydiving 3 times in my 20s, and that was more because, I knew people that wanted to do it. It was exciting. I've always really liked heights, and, I've enjoyed the thrill of being up high and looking down, when we went to the Space Needle in Seattle, or the one in Toronto when I was growing up, and Empire State Building and stuff like that. It was always fun, and I've been on a lot of airplanes growing up, and the thrill of being up high, but finally getting the chance to jump out of a plane was really thrilling to me. But the sport itself was so not cost effective and hard to break into that it was something I had thought about, but I just didn't really have the opportunity to take it further than just doing some tandem dives. Fast forward into my later 20s, I moved to Maui, and this kind of stuff is just much more apparent and natural and organic to the place that the islands are. So as you'll see later in this video, I spent a day at a place in Oahu and jumped off a 30-foot lava rock for the day, and it was just where have you been my whole life? However, going back to what I said originally about that imposter syndrome, even though I haven't necessarily had anybody tell me that I'm a poser or unworthy, to be making videos about this stuff, I often have that internal narrative where I feel that way. I feel like an imposter for, putting this stuff out there, because it's so much more common to see reels and shorts and stuff on television and just all over the internet, a more elite way of doing things. I'll be sitting in a pizza parlor and Chive TV is on, and it's showing all this amazing, jumping from 150 foot cliffs into little narrow basins at the bottom and doing 3 backflips on the way down and all that kind of stuff, and these elite parkour people, and that stuff is awesome. And man, I wish that I could do it. I wish that I had a lifelong exposure to being a gymnast and being a diver, but I just didn't grow up in that culture. I didn't grow up doing swim team or anything, or dive team. I didn't have a lot of access to high up places and things to jump into, let alone the skills and confidence building to be able to do all that wild and wacky stuff that you often see online. Nevertheless, once I discovered how much fun it was to do something like that, also things like surfing and mountainboarding and all the other stuff that this channel is about, regardless of how good or worthy or elite I feel about those things. I enjoy them for myself, and I assume that there are people out there like me that like the idea of things and maybe are tepid about getting into it or exploring it further because it's scary, or you just feel like it's too late. It's not worth the time and investment or risk because, there's already so many other people better at stuff. But honestly, I don't do these things to impress anybody other than myself. I'm not putting this out online to impress anybody, even though I compare myself to people sometimes. But I think that's just a natural thing to do, especially when you're entering into something. You want to know what's in front of you and what you could be capable of and what you could work towards. But I think everybody has their own comfort level and their own way of exploring and learning about stuff. And mine is to try stuff out and get as good at it as I can, but not take it too far where I become detached from the enjoyment of it. And because I have a background in video production and I like to chronicle my own progression with things, it's a learning tool for me. And it's also something that I hope that could inspire other people that are more like me, that are wary of the gatekeepers and anybody that might make us feel unworthy or not confident enough to even try things that might be fun. It's never too late, and it's not about them, and it's not about the perception of it. It's about how you feel about it and how much fun it is for you. That's why I keep pursuing these kind of things. I don't want to live my life regretting not even having tried this stuff. Be sure to visit breathingunderwater.us. Follow me on Instagram at breathingunderwater1 and on Twitter and TikTok at breathingdakine. That's at breathingdakine. And drop me a line at breathingunderwater1@gmail.com. Please note that I do not claim any ownership of any media presented in this podcast, which is only used for promotional purposes unless otherwise noted. And all views and opinions are those of the person expressing them and do not represent any other entities discussed in this podcast.